Your job is to make a connection with the client and to have a relationship with the human, not with their money. The relationship with their money is what everybody else is trying to do.
Hey, Scott, thanks for joining us today. And, hey, this is going to be an awesome interview because, I come from the world that you're living in, the financial advisory world. I spent 16 years in good old Wall Street. And, there's so many awesome questions that I have, for you and, what you do. But I love, everything you're doing because it's focused on the client. You've gotten to the point where you manage $2 billion and you've done this in a short period of time from, how I'd look at it, 5 years.
Yeah. You know what? First of all, Chris, thanks for having me. I've seen the people you interview. I've listened to several of the podcasts. That it's awesome work that you're doing, and you're really talking to great humans. And ultimately, when you talk about the client, I look at everybody as the human we're serving. And so when you really look at people beyond just the transaction, and you look at it from a decision point of relationship building, of connection, it's always going to be bigger than the transaction that the industry tends to focus on, maybe a little too much. And, to answer your question, it's a wide story, but the bottom line is I've been doing this as a financial advisor for 20 years. I started out of my first job was with the Attorney General's office in the state of Virginia. And I was in crime prevention, and I was basically speaking and traveling the state of Virginia, speaking about crime prevention, identity theft, all kinds of things to help people be aware of what was out there that wasn't so positive. And I got into the industry. One of my aunts, kind of said I'd be great at it. So at 23, I go out and I start knocking on doors and cold calling with Edward Jones with zero experience and never having any money. My wife and I bought a house, got married, started from scratch. Her teacher salary is the only reason we actually were able to put the down payment on the home. And we built it from there. And so for 15 years, I ran what I call a lifestyle practice today. I loved it. I coached my kids soccer. I had a blast. Building the business, training, coaching. And then it was, I have an entrepreneur mindset. I had launched a big event, which we'll talk a little bit about, I'm sure, later, but I had this wine festival and I just felt this pull to do more, to be more, to give more. And I wasn't able to do it in a company. And so I went out and started Freedom Street Partners. And it was, me and a couple of partners, and we started with about approximately $100 million under management, and we just built a platform. We built something that people could tap into in our industry and get back to serving clients, serving humans, learning the relationship. And in building that infrastructure, we've attracted other advisors. And we've attracted retiring advisors. And that's really where the book came from, is that I was talking to so many people, Chris, that were looking at the next chapter of their career, the next chapter of their lives, and they aren't or weren't prepared. And defining a rich life, living a legacy, not waiting to have one, and then owning the future were things that they had taught clients and helped clients with for years, but were struggling with it on their own. And so all of this being equal, that's kind of the trek that led me to the place where I'm at today. And I'm just blessed and grateful I have the opportunity to continue to spread that message. Instead of one client at a time, I can help one advisor with hundreds of clients at a time. And I just feel like that exponential value is really, really helpful to me.
Oh, that's fantastic. And, I remember back in the early 2000s, right after the dot-com crash, I was operating skateboard, snowboard shops that I had created and snowboarding professionally. And when the dot-com crash hit, I didn't know what a recession was. I'd never seen that before. It was all good stuff all the way up to that point. And next thing I know, my business is down 30%. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to get a job. So I tried getting a pizza delivery job with Little Caesars, and they weren't hiring. And put my resume out, and only people that ever called me back were financial advisory companies or, Wall Street companies. And I ended up landing there. But like you said in the beginning, like you were really hard up on money. There wasn't much money. And God, I remember I was so hard up when I first got into the industry. And the funny thing, a lot of people don't realize in the financial advisory world, there is usually no salary. And it is literally go out there and I don't want to say this the wrong way, but kill what you eat. I mean, you have to go out there and make it happen. And I remember I couldn't even afford lunch. I got in the bullpen and, I'd be sitting there and I'd be watching all the big guys on the outside offices, the glass offices, and I'd watch what they do. They'd stroll in around 9 o'clock. They'd leave for lunch for an hour, 2 hours, and they were gone by 5 o'clock. And I'm like, all right, so if I have to get one of those offices, all I got to do is do more than what they're doing. I got there at 7. I worked through lunch. I couldn't afford to go to lunch anyway. I packed up some mulberries from the mulberry tree at the house, and that was lunch. And then when they all left, I'm like, this is the perfect time. While they're home, primarily with their families. I didn't have a family. I'm going to hit the phones and I'm going to call people when they're out of work. And that's how I did it. And it's just an awesome climb, and how you do it. But the one thing I seen, in the industry, being in it for 16 years before I retired is, in the beginning, we were all taught, to really go out and solve clients' problems. Retirement, wealth building, legacy. There's so many different things we did as advisors. And as I grew and became one of the top advisors in the firm, I watched a lot of guys change their focus from the client to them. And I saw these big advisors making big bucks, just under $1 million some of these guys were making. And, I watched how they did it because this guy's making, almost $1 million. How do I do that? I mimicked it. But I'd see that they were going out and selling clients products that paid them the highest commissions. And I watched this over and over. And I'm not going to get too deep into it, but how did you stay focused on being true to your clients' needs and goals? Because in this world, that's all that matters. We're here to solve other people's problems. We're not here to solve our own problems. But unfortunately, the industry, how I saw it, it's switched. People some of the advisors I saw and worked with, they were focused on their own problems first, and then maybe they'd help the client. But it was always, which one pays me the most? Have you seen this? And how did you stay away from that in your career?
Yeah, I think there's so much depth to what you just said. Number one, you talked a little bit about the climb, and what I'm most grateful for in the financial advisory world is that it really gave me someone that thought I could be a cop or a teacher growing up, which both are amazing professions. My wife is a teacher, and I still admire so many people that serve today. But the reality is, it gave me an entrepreneurial opportunity. One with guardrails. It's almost like going bowling with the bumpers on the side. Like I could be an entrepreneur, but there was this guardrail. And you're right. I'd actually talk about it a little bit in the book, where I talk about the early advisors, the rookie advisors, and then you go to the midpoint, and then you go to the seasoned. And there are two paths. There are the paths of the advisors and any business, real estate. I don't care what it is. They actually think it's all about the money, and it's always empty, and they're always empty, and they have no real connection with their clients, and they have no real connection with anything they're trying to accomplish except buying the next thing. It's filling life with stuff, right? But there's a ton of us out there. And I think that one of the challenges one of the things I want to make sure that I do for our industry is highlight the people like us, the people that were out there, the people that we train, the businesses we represent and consult with that are the opposite of those people. The ones that have always found the value in the connection. They built a relationship. I always teach our advisors, I'm like, guys, here's guys and gals, because we have a ton of female advisors now, but your job is to make a connection with the client and to have a relationship with the human, not with their money. The relationship with their money is what everybody else is trying to do. What I want to do is I want to have a relationship with you, with your life, with your family. And then the last part of what you mentioned, how did I actually stay focused? I think it was really simple. I started in that 2002 timeframe where the truth was nobody trusted anybody. September 11th had just happened. I'm 23.
That's nobody. How old I was.
Yeah, nobody wants to invest with me. They're telling me that real estate never goes down, and they should invest in, and they've watched their house double and triple, and nobody wants to do anything, right? And that's what you could hear yourself getting into this mantra, but then I started to realize, wow, you know what? I get to connect with people and help them solve something else. And if I can solve all the other things, I started to see the husband and wife come in that were challenged in their marriage, and money was the number one thing that was breaking them down. And I could help fix that. I could hear one of them say what was important to them, and I could replicate it in a way that the other person understood it. I could empathize with both people. I could be a psychiatrist and sometimes a marriage counselor, and all these things in this career that were bigger than the money. And guess what? If I kept them leaning in the right direction, which was focused and confident and trusted, and most of all, consistent, they were going to be successful. The recipe works. So, I hope that answers your question, kind of where you were thinking it went, but that's my logic. And it sounds like we have a lot of correlation to the timelines and when we started.
Absolutely. You entered the business 1 year before me. At the exact same age, I entered the business. The word rich, a lot of people throw that word around. And right now we're 2021, right after COVID. There's so many disconnections. And in this world of investor confidence, in this world of speculation, people are really so hung up on getting rich fast. Building wealth is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Life is not a sprint either. Why is there such a disconnection from reality today, with people just chasing these unrealistic returns, chasing this fantasy world of getting rich fast? Because rich to me is the next poor. And I'd love your definition of rich, because rich on paper means nothing. It's what you keep that matters. And I'd love your opinion on the term rich.
Yeah, in the book, I start off with a story of my son, and it was several years ago. And I have now a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old son. And they were little kids at this point in time. They used to share a room. We have a pretty big house, but they shared a room because I felt like at the end of the day, two brothers fight all day long, but when they go to bed, they were going to be buddies and they were going to have those years forever. And until they demanded to be separate, I kept them in the same room. And it was growing up in a small home and then living in something different. It was my world of trying to teach my kids that the relationships in our family structure are way more important than the size of our house or separating in different spaces. And I think it's a great definition of rich when my son said, "Hey, Dad, would you be rich if you didn't have us?"
Oh, wow.
And I thought, I actually laughed out loud because my oldest son is the one that asked the question, and he's very entrepreneurial and he thinks like I do. And he loves talking about things that are really big picture. And I laughed and I said, "Buddy, in some ways, financially, I may have more money in my pocket. You're not cheap. You are not cheap. But here's the thing. I'd be empty. I'd be lost. I would never know what I'm missing." See, the key to richness is investing and giving of yourself to other people, to another purpose, to something bigger than yourself. And when you're building something bigger than yourself, and your children are obviously a representation of that. I mean, they see all of our authenticity. They see you at your best. They see you at your worst. That was really a definitive, interesting point that I was talking about with Rich. The fear and the greed cycle is what you're talking about with people. And the why behind it is really simple. Most people are chasing something that they'll never catch. If Zig Ziglar said, if you chase money, you're never going to catch it. And I was listening to a personality expert who I trained with, and he was telling a story of when he went to a training with Zig or had a conversation with him. I don't remember the exact parameters, but it was one of these conversations where Zig said, "Listen, man, you're chasing what you'll never catch." And he's like, I feel like I'm chasing the next job. I'm chasing payroll. I just can't catch it. And Zig said, there's only three things you need to be successful. Number one is you have to help people. And if you help people, it's fundamental. Sounds simple enough. Most careers help people. Number two is you got to turn a profit. Nowadays, we hear all kinds of kids coming out of school and they all want to change the world. And I love that because I want to change the world. But change the world with what you're unique at. Turn a profit at it so that you can stay in business. Stay in business, turn a profit, help people, turn a profit. Number one, serve something bigger than yourself. in a higher power. In my instance is God. And at the end of the day, when those three things are met, money chases you. And if you're, the analogy is used for this purpose. You've seen the clients that watch their accounts every second of every day. I call it the Ebenezer Scrooge effect. You think back to the old world of cartoons, of Donald Duck back in the day. And then you go all the way back to Scrooge and the Christmas Carol and all these things, right? He counted and looked at his money all the time. All it does is that if that's what's filling your brain, it's not going to fill your bucket. It's empty. It's completely useless. And I think our industry is one where it's so focused on money that in some ways it's awesome. And the way that it's awesome is I do videos on YouTube, and I started doing some called Conversations About Money because I realized I was having conversations that people were afraid to talk about. I listened to one of your other podcasts and this conversation came up, and it was so real in that, we talk about things that everybody else is afraid to talk about.
Yeah.
I talk about money openly with my kids. We share it. When I grew up, it was like, you don't talk about your dad's paycheck. You don't ask him what he makes. You don't, like, there was this definitive line, and it's honestly that scarcity mindset versus that abundance mindset, right? It's thinking that there's only so much to go around. We don't need anyone in our business. It's a cycle of poverty, in my opinion. When you expand your mindset, and money just happens to be how you get the things you really want in life, freedom, love, relationships, and money happens to just be a byproduct of those things, it's a lot easier to focus on. And so those clients and those people that chase that greed cycle, Chris, is I think inevitable. It's going to be that way all the time. There's always going to be cycles of highs and lows. It's focusing on staying in some level of balance when everybody else is completely out of whack. And we see it all the time.
Yeah, I think you nailed it right there. Staying in a balance. And that's the toughest thing, especially in this. We're in the longest bull market, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, in history. I think this is one of the longest that we've ever been in. Yeah. And if you think about the cycles, they sometimes call them the seasons. A lot of I call them kids now that I'm 44, but the young adults, the millennials, they have never seen a down market. They've never seen anything other than this bull that we've been in since, the 2008, and they don't even remember that. Now I know you do, because I that's literally burned into my mind, because I made every mistake you could have made in 2008, and I almost went bankrupt after it. What happened is I got messed up here. My mind and my heart were in the wrong places. And you talked about Zig Ziglar, and I love Zig Ziglar, and it's also mentioned in the Bible, since you mentioned God. The number one thing we always need to remember, Zig Ziglar says, if you help enough people get what they want, you will get what you want. And it is some people say it's a spiritual universal law, but let's just assume that it is a law. And all laws are just like gravity. They cannot be broken, bent, or changed. Go to the top of a building, jump, and the result is always exactly the same. You're a pancake. Well, the law of giving is exactly that. It's a law. And if we focus all of our attention on giving, and too many people are brainwashed to think that giving means I got to reach in my pocket and hand somebody money. That is not what giving means. Giving means making somebody smile. Giving means just changing somebody's day in a positive way. And there's so many things. We're not even going to get granular with that. Sure, some days, write a check. I've got this habit that I've built. And, we all get envelopes in the mail, right? Especially more around Thanksgiving and Christmas. And they're always asking for money. Back in the day, when I was in that greed mindset, in that messed up mindset, I would get these and I'd be like, oh, everybody just wants money. Everybody wants money. Now, you know what I do? I literally, every one I get, my wife knows this and she laughs at me about it. Every one I get, I just got one from ASPCA, and I open it up. I don't look at anything. I tear the little coupon off and I literally pull out a checkbook. I still write checks, and I write a check. Sometimes it's $5. Sometimes it's $25. Sometimes it's a couple hundred. Whatever my heart says to write the check for, I do. And I just mail it. I don't think about anything. I don't put my name. I don't put my number. I don't want recognition for it. I just want to unconditionally give. And if I save one animal, if I allow one animal to get neutered or saved from, certain death, that is what we're here for. And I think if people would just change their focus around the greed and me, because we do live in a me society, and change the focus around how do I serve others? How do I help others? They would all be rich, if you will, or wealthy in a certain sense, because wealth, when you compare it or just call wealth money, it is empty. And I've met plenty of multimillionaires and billionaires that are absolutely hollow and miserable. And they have enough money to buy any car they want, any house they want, but they lack purpose and they lack determination because they've arrived. They've arrived at this level of success monetarily, and that level of success, when they got there, was a dead end street. So with that being said, what would you say the difference between success and fulfillment is?
I love what you're talking about here, because I firmly believe that we are the energy we put out into the world. And so there's a frequency of giving that you have to be tuned into. And when you're tuned into yourself, you can't be tuned into anything else around you. See, most people are so focused on themselves that they don't actually see, feel, hear the very things around them that could make a daily impact. You know, when you talk about living a legacy is something I talk about. It's not waiting. I can't tell you how many times I've been on a board and some guy or gal walks in, they're like, 68 years old. They're like, I've been working for so many years and now it's time for me to give back. Dude, like, what are you waiting for? And the truth is, what I found is that frequency of giving has allowed me to open up the frequency to a higher level of leadership. It's the frequency to a higher level of culture in our company, in our family, in our influence. I mean, it's the stage that you're given is unbelievable the more that you're giving. And so, I have a habit that I have to remind myself of sometimes. And they're little things. I tell a story about having a bad day. And I was at I run a wine festival that we started about 12, 13 years ago. We've given about $2.5 million to charity locally. It's a blast. It's so much fun. And it's one of my favorite things to do. But one of the Boys and Girls Club, I'm on the board there, and Leah, my good friend who runs one of the local groups and schools, was at my table. We were giving them $10,000 this past couple weeks. And she goes, I said something about the book. And she goes, you wrote a book? I said, yeah, you're in it. And she goes, what do you mean I'm in it? And I said, Leah, I wrote one of the stories of the day I had a bad day. And I said, I got caught up in myself. My tire was flat. My car was pulled all the way into the garage. I couldn't get to the tire. The battery was dead. Like something, just all this stuff went wrong at one time. And I said, then I went around and I had to get the battery charged, but the Tahoe had to go to the dealer. So by the time I spent 3-4 hours, something, I finally got it done. Then something bad happened at the office. I had to go back to the office to fix a mistake someone had made. And I'm sitting at my desk, my hands are on my head, and I'm literally caught up in myself. And I'm thinking, Scott, you don't have bad days, but if you did, this is a bad day. And I get a text, and it's Leah. And she goes, hey, do you think I could get the support of the board to help one of my moms who might be homeless tonight? And I said, tell me about her. What's going on? And she goes on to tell me that she needs $380, that her cycle of her paychecks from the Taco Bell she works at was off by a week, and she wasn't going to make rent, and they were going to be kicked out, and it was going to rain that night. And this was Leah texting me. And I said, tell me about the mom. I like to know your story. I like to know the human behind who we're helping. And it allows me to share the story better with other people. So she tells me mom works every day. Kids go to the Boys and Girls Club. They're dedicated. They're great kids. It's a great family. They struggle. And so Leah had $80 and she needed $300. To make a long story short, I literally Venmo'd her the money. Leah then delivered the money to the individual, paid the rent. I can't tell you, within 30 seconds, my head was up. My day was great. My life was better. And the only reason I bring that story up is not to say I'm a good guy, because that's what people that are tuned into the frequency of themselves think, that this sounds like egotistical like exposure. And it's the opposite of that. It's sharing the story. So you open up to the frequency so that if you could actually send someone $5 and it changes their life, what a big difference. And that's all you're talking about. You've opened up the frequency to write the check first, ask questions second. It's the impact that you're making today, not waiting till tomorrow.
The second you did it, you perked right up. You went from having a bad day to all of a sudden now you're at the top of the world. And a lot of people think, they get into this giving thing and they're like, oh, well, if I give, I get. And they focus so much on the get, so they forget about the give. They're like, oh, I got to give and get. But they always think that the get means, money or financial, or I'm going to get what I want. Getting for you, that thing that you got back was just, it changed your day, it changed your overall energy that day. That's so much more valuable than any money you could have earned that day.
They still live there. Family that goes to the club. And I got an update and, and she was like, she still works at the Taco Bell. She walks there every day. I mean, it was an awesome story. And, and they're still continuing to get help and we've helped them more, but you couldn't, the habit, the daily habit of impact is really just creating that frequency. It's turning on the station in your brain to open up to what's around you. And you can't do that if you're just focused on yourself. I think the true path to success, going back to your original question, and fulfillment is just giving all of yourself. If you're holding anything back, you feel empty. If you know you have more to give to the world, you feel empty. And when you're a spark, and I've always said I'm a sprinter, right? The race is long. And you cannot be, like you said earlier, you can't be successful and expect to have it immediately. In fact, what do most kids do when they're given something without earning it? They usually waste it, right?
Absolutely.
It's usually gone. Lottery winners, anybody that inherits huge amounts of money that has never had it, like 90+% of them, gone. And the reason is they didn't earn it. They didn't build it. They didn't learn from their mistakes. They didn't fail. They didn't feel what you felt that you explained, right? It's all those things together, but it's when you start giving all of yourself and you're not afraid to give all of yourself. You're not afraid to show your cuts and your scrapes and your scars and admit when you're wrong and do it in public and share it with people. But when you're giving of yourself in that way, guess what? Success is easy. It's simple.
It really is.
It's so much easier.
I wish I was tuned into the frequency a long time ago, and, I would have been much further along and I would have been able to help a lot more people. But unfortunately, we all have our path in life, and that path often involves failure and learning from the hard mistakes, because, hey, you could have somebody sitting there, right in front of you, and you tell them all the things they need to do. You got to give more. You got to, do all these things, and your life will be a success. And they're going to ignore them until they hit that dead end and they realize, wow, I remember when Scott and Chris told me that these are the things I should have done, and I didn't because I was chasing something empty.
If you think that things that happen when you're young don't have an impact on you for your entire life, you probably aren't thinking hard enough. And for me, my parents had gone out on a date. I was about 3 years old. We had a babysitter who was a next door neighbor, granddaughter, young woman, watching my sister and I, who was a baby. And somebody comes into our home and they're wearing a jersey, like just a numbered jersey and underwear. And I'm a 3-year-old. I thought it was my father. Like, I mean, who else walks around in their underwear in your house, right? And they grab a butcher knife, and I'm in my bedroom and it looks directly at the kitchen. So I see them grab the knife. I'm like, I wonder why they're grabbing a knife. And so I walk out, and, it was a scenario where he was assaulting the babysitter, and he had a knife against her back, and she was crying and screaming. And I went and got a mini Busch Gardens baseball bat, which was, it was 18 inches long. I mean, it was a tiny little bat, perfect for a little kid. And I went at him and tried to hit him, and he chased me back to the room with the knife. And I threw a chair up against the door, like you remember in cartoons. And, and the vivid detail of which I remember this to this day is amazing. And I always tell people, your children remember way more and see way more than you think they're seeing. And the long and short of it is, there's a lot that happened that night that I didn't understand. And what I saw and what I didn't see were definitely things that I think were traumatic. The neighbor actually pulled up to pick her up in the driveway. He ran out. There was an assault that occurred. She was in very bad shape. And when the cops came, I was able to describe what he looked like, what he was wearing, all those things. And there was this instance that would change my life. And I was young, but okay, so that's the story. But let's fast forward to writing this book. And I'm trying to figure out, what failures I've had and what things shape me. And I start to go through this path of going, I forgot that I couldn't sleep for years at night without waking up being petrified. I forgot what it was like to get out of my bed and try to go into my parents' room, and literally I couldn't move at all. And I remember just being frozen in the hallway, not able to speak, not able to talk. And these are all little things that I had forgotten, that I hadn't even talked about. But we started talking about it, and there were a couple really key takeaways that I think are amazing, because a lot of your listeners have been through trauma, or they've witnessed trauma. Sometimes being a part of it, seeing it, being there for it is all a part of something, just feeling that you can't control a situation that you want to help. But my mom and dad were amazing. At the end of the day, we had a family doctor who told my mom not to get me therapy, to just talk about it openly with me anytime that I brought it up. She made the young girl a hero. She told me about how amazing the police were. She, helped me talk through things when I needed to talk through things. And, I didn't really bring them in on the fear factor. I kept that to myself for many, many years, really forever. I just eventually learned how to deal with it. But the interesting thing is, the way she allowed me to process it helped me heal. And more importantly, Chris, this was even better, as I talked to a children's trauma doctor years later, just actually a couple of years ago. And I was telling her this story, and I said, she goes, "What actually helped you overcome the challenge of just having this happen again, and someone come in and you're just 3 years old? What do you do?" And I said, I just used to self-talk to myself. I used to lay in bed, and when I'd start to go down a negative cycle, I would self-coach myself, and I'd say, "Scott, the likelihood of this happening again is very slim. Scott, everything is fine. You've got the whole house here. You know the escape routes. You know what you'll do. Like, I would walk through scenarios when I stayed at someone else's house when I was just a young teenager, like 13. I would check the doors before I go to bed. I would know the outward way to leave. I mean, I did things that other kids didn't have to do. And I also didn't trust anybody but myself. When you have your barrier of trust broken at such a young age, you're responsible for the world for yourself. And there's a little bit of emptiness that you have to work through when you're young. And I think it really helped build this strength to overcome lots of other things. And so I bring that up and I tell that story because I've shared that very limitedly in my life, but the number of people that come to me and tell me how much that part of the book, this small section, helped them understand something or face something, it's worth sharing. And I'll answer any questions on that. I'm not afraid. If you don't get the whole story out, it's kind of hard to explain what it was and how it happened.
Well, I asked that question not knowing if you'd even really want to answer it, because it's definitely one of those that's way off topic from money and all the things we're talking about. But, it brings up that whole thing of fear. And I think, everybody lives with fear, whether it's real or made up or just stuck in our minds. I mean, fear is always real, and it stops people from doing a lot of things in life. And you are able to overcome fear by going through these processes, these habits that you created, these exit routes, and just running these scenarios through your head. So I think it really just spells out that whole fear thing, and fear can be conquered. Fear isn't even real in most cases, unless you're being, chased by an 800-pound grizzly bear. That fear is real. Right. And you better run your ass off very quickly. But, I think, a lot of people right now, just, they need to address fear, and they need to handle it in their own ways and really face it head on. And I always like to talk about the storm. And I truly, and you might have a different view, I fear that there is a big storm coming, and that storm is a financial collapse of sorts. Maybe it's a recession. I would say it might even be more serious just from the things I do. And this is what I study. So I'm completely a nerd, but you being in the financial world and managing lots of money, what do you see happening? I mean, you can't disagree that things just don't make a lot of sense right now in this current, economic bubble or world that we live in. I mean, the stock market's a bubble, the crypto market's a bubble, the real estate market, I mean, crazy, cars, crazy. How long can this continue? And once we kind of talk about that, like, how do you handle that with your clients and helping them prepare for the storm and helping them deal with the fear? A lot of them just want to bury their heads in the sand and just pretend, oh, it's not real, it's not real, it's not coming, it's not real, I'm just going to bury my head. But you need sometimes to face that fear like you did with that story, rise up and be the light in the darkness for other people and show them. I mean, you had the escape routes planned out. You were the light, whether you knew it or not, because if it ever happened, you were the one that would have shown people to safety. And you do that today with their finances. How are you planning to do that with what's coming?
It's a great question. And I think it's a nice transition in the sense that my entire aura is to protect and connect. And so where do I get it from? It comes a lot from the very start of my life where something happened. When you fear for your life, other things are less scary. And so a financial crisis is something that I'm not very fearful of. It doesn't mean that I don't know that things cycle off and on, but even looking at 08 and 09, when you look back at it and you look at the blip that it caused, it was enormous in the moments, but it's never as big outside of the moment as it felt. It's a lot like a long-term relationship. I've been married for almost 20 years. And I always ask clients this when I do big events or I speak. I ask, it's a fun exercise, but it helps get the point across, right? How many people have been married for 20 years and they stand up? How about 30 years, 40 years? You get to 60 years and they're always the best people to ask a question of. And I say, how many of those 60 years did you have bad days? And they both roll their eyes like, oh my gosh, days were bad. And then you say bad weeks, bad months, bad years. And I say, okay, so you had bad days, bad months, bad years, pretty similar to the markets, pretty similar to real estate, pretty similar to every cycle of anything we do. But every long-term relationship has a core foundation of which it's built on. Now, a marriage is built on love and commitment. And I think that investment strategies are also built on committed strategies to your core values. At the end of the day, you should never have more in one place than you can handle. You have to make sure that you have those different areas of allocation. You have to make sure that you're spread out in ways that you can handle the ups and downs. But when you look at the long term, to your point early in this conversation, it's always going to be okay. I think when I get caught up in the short term, it's way scarier than it will be when I look back on it years later. And the lesson involved will only make us stronger. So the other thing that happens when I ask these people about their 60-year marriages is I say, what happened when you came out of that really bad year? If you stayed committed and you stayed, to your core values. Now, I'm not talking about staying committed to one investment. I'm not saying that you ride things all the way down and up like that. That's not a strategy. But what I am saying is you're committed to your core value of how you stayed married and what it was. And these people will say, we came out stronger. We're actually better off. Our relationship was built on something even better. And I think your financial success and our financial success and everyone we serve comes from these blips that remind us that money in quick is usually money out quick. So everybody that's making these fast returns, they're not really going to keep it, but it's the people that have a strategy and a committed focus that will be okay. And I think it's our job to build that around the plan, to build it around the story and the human and their goals and their dreams. And when you're doing that, it's bigger because you're refocusing on not the storyline of the Wall Street Journal today. It's the storyline of their life, of what they're working for or towards.
Same thing with last year when COVID hit. I mean, that fallout created massive opportunities. If something does happen again, there's going to be opportunities in your strategies with these core beliefs to keep safe money aside in most, of these clients' portfolios, to keep safe money aside for future opportunities.
At the end of the day, I think that it's always important to remind people that while things are good, it's not always going to be perfect. So the one thing that you'll never hear me say is think about when we were trained in the industry. I was trained, you were trained by people in sales roles back 20 years ago that never saw a down market in 20 years. They literally saw the 80s and 90s do nothing but go up. And they would tell you, put 100% in, never, asset allocation didn't matter. You need to be 80% stock to bonds. You need, like, everything was the worst advice that I was ever given. Right. And
you're the first person that's ever said that to me. You're right.
It was horrible. And they had zero experience. In 1987, the market ended up. Like, they remember the day, but not and nowadays everything's sped up, right? Cycles are quicker. Timelines are quicker. The COVID, the down to up and up to down and all this was quicker. And so it's all the more reason to focus on the relationship. And so the conversation we have every day with all of our advisors, just today we sent out a guidebook that one of our advisors developed on down market strategies. We're not preaching that that's what's going to happen. What we're saying though is when it does, how are you the first person to serve? Here's what I also learned. In down markets, most leaders hide.
Yes.
In down times, most leaders sit in their seat. Most people sit on the plane and let someone else show you the way off when it's going down. The ones that are leaders, the reason why they're exceptions, you can't be exceptional without being the exception. And I love that because exception's in the word. Be the exception to be exceptional. And the exceptional do what everyone else is afraid to do. You pick up the phone, you have the one-on-one meeting, you face-to-face Zoom, you call them and you find out what their fears are. In COVID, I can remember a couple of conversations where somebody said, I can't lose anything. What are we going to do? And I say, when do you think this will be over? What do you really think? What are you most scared of? What if it lasts 2 years, Scott? How about the question? So if you had 2 years of income, would that make you feel comfortable and secure and safe? Now, I'm not saying, in our industry, I can't tell you what someone should do without knowing their story, and compliance is pretty crazy in our industry. But the reason I bring that up is just because staying focused on the human behind the Zoom, behind the phone, behind the process helps us stay focused on their goals and dreams. And the planning is really where the industry has shifted. The beautiful thing is that now it's the CFP board that's helping to regulate what's important to people and all of the additional fiduciary duties and the regulatory things that have been put into place that people can complain about, but they focus on the end client and help everybody do a little bit more towards helping people. What we know is to stay focused in times like this, it's all about mindset. And I believe that money is a mindset. If you adjust our mindset and stay focused on the goals, it's amazing what can happen. It's the giving, it's all the things we've been talking about, but it's mindset. It's shifting this to not be afraid of anything. Fear is usually, it can really paralyze you. But if you actually get to the point where the opposite of fear is action. If I do something, the fear is way worse. The thought of something happening, the thought of a market downturn is way worse than it actually happening, because when it actually happens, opportunity exists.
Too many people focus on the chunk of money and the values of it, and that's what gets them to not go to sleep at night, when really they should be focusing on what money does, because it is just a tool to serve whatever our goals are.
So sometimes you have to use words that get people to think, right? Hardworking Hank is a story of, a culmination. It's built off a real person, but there's some added storyline to help people really understand. But it's the person that works all the time. They put their head down, they go to work, and they kind of forget that everything else exists. The frequency of work is all they can think of. And it's always, Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach is unbelievable. And he says, there's here and there's there. And if you're always focused on there, you're never here. And then every time you actually get there, it's now the here and there's another there. And you keep extending out. And so you have to kind of bring the there to here. And if you're listening to this, it's even more confusing than it sounds. But the reality is this: most people are looking out at the wrong things. And Hank was focused on the work and the time and helping one more person, all the right things, but he had no systems, no processes. He hadn't defined what success was. He hadn't really laid out how he was going to live life, not work. Work is not life. Work is a part of your life. And if you enjoy it, that's even better. Laid back Lonnie is the guy who doesn't give enough. He's the guy who you described. He rolls in at 10 o'clock in the morning. He takes a 2-hour lunch and he leaves early every day. And then he's unhappy with himself. He's gained weight. He drives a bad car. He drives a car he can't afford. His home and his luxury vacations are drowning him. And he can't figure out why he's got this great job, but he just can't make enough money. It's because he never actually works. He just goes in and goes through the motions. He lives life in a way that knows deep down he has more to give. And so it's finding the happy median between the hardworking Hank and that laid back Lonnie that helps people define what it is they're working towards. Whether it's the client, whether it's us, whether it's Hank or Lonnie, what are the things that you're working for? What is the money going to do for you? If you miss all your kids' soccer games and basketball games and all the things that you're actually working to provide, and you keep saying, I'm doing it for you, I'm doing it for you, you're not doing it for anybody but yourself, and yourself is unhappy and unfocused and uncomfortable. And so is your family and everybody around you. So, it's those characters were to allow for, in our industry, you kind of define some of those people that get caught up in thinking that their impact is their business. Your impact can be part of your business, but it's got to be something else. How many people come into an office and they say, Scott, I want to retire. And I go, what do you want to do? And they say, I don't know, but I just want to stop working.
Yes. They don't even know what they're working for.
I don't even know. So basically what I say is, okay, so you want to go on a plane and I'm going to land you in Detroit and you're going to be mad that we just went to Detroit. I didn't want to be in Detroit. Why are we in Detroit? And I'm going to be like, because you didn't tell me where you wanted to go.
Yes.
If you want to go to California, you got to get on the flight that's going to California, lay it out, put it together and build it, visualize it. Something else you talked about with fear. I love this. Dr. Kevin Elko is someone I love to listen to. He has a thing called the Monday Morning Cup of Inspiration. It's just like a radio voice. He records it. He sends it out to everybody, what he calls his Cup Nation. And I send it to my family and friends all the time. But Dr. Elko always says, worry is praying for what you don't want. And so I've written that down on these Post-it notes on a regular basis. And I put it right on a client's folder, on my employees' desks. Every time they're fearful about something they cannot control, they're visualizing the opposite of success. So when Michael Phelps lost his goggles and he's swimming in the Olympics to win his next gold medal, he visualized the strokes. He had memorized it. He knew what he could control and what he couldn't. And he finished the race a winner, another gold medal. If the person only focuses on what they can control and they don't worry about what they can't, they're visualizing the success that they'll have in the end. If they visualize failure, it is what you visualize. You are what you think you are. And the truth is, if you're worrying constantly about what might happen, we're honestly putting ourselves in a position that's weaker than we need to be. And so that's another thing I really try to make sure our teams, our advisors, our clients, and any friends and family think about. And you know what? Sometimes I got to write it on my own sticky note and remind myself.
You know how I remind myself? There's one moment in time that we all are in full control, and I wear a watch. I don't know if you can see it, but it says now. It doesn't, a lot of people are like, oh, what is that? I'm like, it's a plastic watch that just has a sticker that says now. Because every time I want to know the time, I look down and it says now, because I'm in full control and there are no problems right now. So if I focus on 3 hours from now, I get in a state where that world doesn't exist, that time doesn't exist. So I get worried, I get anxiety sets in. And if I focus on, what happened 2 hours ago, I start thinking about maybe the bad things that happened and all the things that are done and gone. We can't live in the past and we can't live in the future, but we are in full control in the now. So these are just the little daily habits that I do, that I live my life by, that I never used to. And you mentioned that whole thing with retirement. I had that, I can't even count how many times. So I want to retire. And I wasn't conditioned enough or wise enough, because wisdom comes with time and failure. And I wasn't wise enough back then as a young advisor to know that when somebody says, I want to retire, we should ask them, like, okay, what does retirement look like? What does the perfect day look like? I struggled with that my whole life. I was always a hard worker, but I'd work myself to death because I never knew what I was working toward. I had a mentor stop me one day, and before he brought me on to coach me, he said to me, he says, why do you work so hard? And I gave him all these reasons. He said, no. And for 15 minutes, I kept giving him answers, and he kept saying, that's not the reason. That's not the reason. I got frustrated. And finally, I said, Kent, what do you want me to say? He said, I want you to tell me why you work so hard. And I said, I guess I don't know. And he says, because you don't know what your perfect day looks like. That's when it all changed for me. It just clicked, Scott. It was just like right then and there, I knew what I had been missing. I had no clue what I was working for and what that perfect day looked like. Retirement is a fictitious word. They paint pictures, or, the big financial companies show the sailboat, or the big whale or something floating across the ocean. Like, retirement isn't even real. It's what we want our perfect day to look like. And when you hit that perfect day, you brought this up, we constantly have to change that. It's called the arrival syndrome. When we arrive at that day, when we finally have gotten to the point where we can live our perfect day, you're not done. You need to elevate that perfect day. You need to go on and improve and update that perfect day. Otherwise, you're just there's only one way to go when you've arrived, and that's back down.
Yeah, it's leveling up, right? If I've never had a filet mignon, I don't know how great it tastes. But once I've had a filet mignon, and now I go back to eating a really old, bad piece of steak like I might have eaten when I was a little kid, I'm like, man, I remember how good that filet was. And I think that when you've leveled up in ways, you do remember those things. I also think we have to remember there's a different human behind everything. My wife and I are a great balancing act between each other, because I'm an entrepreneur, man. If I'm sitting still, I am not comfortable. I mean, I have to focus. I meditate when I want to be still and be in the now, and I relax and I read, but I'm still doing something. Like, having nothing. Discipline is freedom for me and for anybody, I think. But what that discipline is and what you need, for my wife is much more comfortable in a slower pace. She loves to be at home and at the pool outside. And I'm like, we should go here first, and then we'll come home, and then we'll do the pool. Like, my brain goes in 5 different directions, and we balance each other out. She's like, hey, today we're just going to do the pool. Tomorrow we'll do 3 things before we do the pool, right? And I'm making this example, but the reason I bring it up is every client, every human, every retirement definition is different. And for me or you, stopping working is not really something I ever see doing. I just see it being in a different capacity. Maybe one day my kids and I are running a business together. Maybe one day I'm working on a project that changes the trajectory of my community in a bigger way than I ever thought I could. Maybe it's church related. I don't know, but it's certainly going to be a job, and it's going to be something that I'm giving of myself for something bigger than myself.
And in saying that, one thing I want to wrap this on is a quote that I say to myself all the time. And I just want, after I read the quote, I just want you to just tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. The quote is by Will Rogers. And Will Rogers says, the biggest problem in America is not what people don't know. The biggest problem in America is what people think they know that just ain't so. What's your first thought?
The first thought is how lucky we are. It's in the word of everything I do. It's called freedom, and freedom isn't free. And so when people start to think that freedom is free, they forget that it takes work, purpose, pride. Freedom is something that we work hard for, and everybody worked hard for. Today's Veterans Day. What a great day to talk about freedom, right? You know, I mean, this is something that's so true. And founding fathers said, and I don't remember if it was John Adams or if it's been attributed to anybody, but we are soldiers so our children can be teachers, so their children can be artists. But guess what happens to the generation of artists? There's another generation behind them that is soldiers, because most of the time the artists forget that all that freedom wasn't just there for you to take. It was there to build purpose and to give of yourself, not to just give one thing that you do great. And so when you say that quote, it makes me think of the greatest place that I can think of. And that's, excuse me, right here in a place where I can create freedom. I can create a company from nothing. I can help people in a podcast. We can share our message and our story and change the world in a way that goes beyond us. And I think defining what freedom means to you is something that I really focus on, whether it's in the book or it's on our company. And I love what that quote symbolizes.
So veterans out there, thank you for so much that you gave, and thank you for my children, the freedom that they're going to enjoy. And Scott, thank you for your time today.
Man, this was awesome. Chris, I will come anytime. We got to definitely do more things in the future together. Bo was right. We were meant to talk to each other. So appreciate you. Appreciate the opportunity. And for anyone that wants to find me, check me out at scottdanner.com or buy the book on Amazon. Thanks for giving me the platform.
You're very welcome. And thank you everybody for checking this episode out. Make sure you check Scott's book out, Freedom Street, and we'll see you on the next episode. Until then.
If you liked this video, make sure you smash, kind of like this, the thumbs up button, and make sure you subscribe to this channel for more amazing content. See you soon.